tell us about that framework and where it's gone now, 15 or 20 years later, because I think that what we're trying to do in terms of having our evidence be artifact, which you've just explained the importance of, plus the reflections, which has to happen somewhere, and the validations, in this case we're using ISTE-NETs, it seems like what we're trying to do is just a perfect candidate for your discoveries.
Well, learning circles are now 30 years old, and I thought we invented them. But when I was asked to do an encyclopedic entry on online learning circles, it caused me to do some internet research. And I actually found out that learning circles is over 100 years old. And wow. The term has been used,
well,
fortunately.
I guess you didn't invent it because you're looking real good for 100.
Fortunately, used in very similar ways. And I think the concept of a circle is a really very powerful symbol in our minds. Yeah. It's been used particularly in Australia, but in other places, as a form of public discourse around political concerns. So a leader might say to the community, we're considering putting in a park or changing the way the roads go or some kind of civic problem, and they would put it out to learning circles. So groups of people would form, they would take the materials, they would understand them, and they would have a product that they needed to produce at the end, a report, a conclusion. So there was this civic organization. There was also wisdom circles from earlier Native Americans that are very similar to this participatory management of learning circles. And there was also in New York a kind of common persons university that was done in, I think, about the 1800s, where people who couldn't come to the university to study were then formed in learning circles, almost like what you would get from the internet now, or what you're doing now, forming people in small groups and having them have readings and products. So there were lots of different people who did something similar to learning circles, to the way we did learning circles, in these various different time frames. But we started in the early 80s, and we found that, when internet, it wasn't actually the internet, it was, we were using the Source, which was a military network early on.
Stuff.
And we and I think other people called it SneakerNet, because while the university had the connections to the other, we were able to connect countries, Japan and Mexico and the United States, and in the United States, Alaska, which is, definitely not a foreign country, but very different than the mainland. And when we connected these, the links were mostly at the university, but the graduate students would run out in their sneakers and put the disks in the computers at the schools. In fact, bring the computers to the schools. And it was digital by the time they got it. It just had this last leg being non-digital. But this early networking made it possible for us to form these groups of students working together, students and teachers working together in a participatory management style rather than somebody
autocratic, top down.
Than somebody being in charge and other people following. What we were finding at the early days, and you and I were both there, is people were doing computer pals, or they were doing large-scale projects where one person would sponsor a project and then try to get people all over the world to participate in them. These were the two kind of common models. And we tried the computer pals model, and the problem with that model is that if one person drops out, another person has to drop out. So you double your failure rate.
Right.
And that seemed to be and you had to match people one-to-one, and that's a very hard thing to do with people, classrooms of different sizes, teachers, different size schools. So we didn't find that a very workable model. And the other model, which was the teacher in one place gets a great idea for a project and gets all these people to submit, what we realized from that model is most of the learning got done by the teacher who was organizing the project and the students in that classroom.
Right.
And the people sending in stuff, not so much.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, how can we solve that problem? Those are two kind of anchor points. How can we create a structure that will take the advantage of the classroom here and minimize the dropout rate?
Right.
So we came up with learning circles, and really we were using two different ideas to put learning circles together. One was the circle time in elementary schools. So what is circle time? Circle time is when little kids sit in a circle, and the purpose of it is for them to develop their verbal talking skills and for them to bring a little bit of the home culture into the school culture so that the school can be more sensitive and there can be kind of more of a sharing of the background.
Right.
So now take that and move it up to elementary school. What you have is kids writing instead of speaking, and they're developing their writing skills, and they're sharing their home and school culture to a world culture, to a global culture. So you've just taken the same model and made the skill a little bit more sophisticated, literacy skills, and you've increased the reach, because now they're learning about other countries instead of just their own country. The other model that we were using that was popular at the time was quality circles in business.
Right.
So businesses were moving away from somebody at the top deciding what everybody should do to seeing that managers formed in groups can decide problems for themselves, and that knowledge out of practice has value. And so that participatory management was really important in learning circles. So learning circles, everyone is a leader, everyone is a follower. So the principle of a learning circle is not a single project, but that everybody brings a project to the learning circle, and the person who brings that project is the leader of that project in that learning circle, but everybody's a leader. And everyone's a follower. And what we realized is that the amount of work that people have to do on other people's projects, just like we had on this model here, is really pretty minimal.
Yeah.
And the amount of work they have to do on the one that they're sponsoring is pretty major. So you can seat the project that is curriculum connected in the learning circle in a way that makes 60% of your time focused on a project that is connected to your curriculum, that is really important to you, and then you can divide up the students into groups, and they can participate in the other projects concurrently, all at the same time.
Yeah.
So the time that it takes to do that is really pretty minimal, and what you get back is an understanding of the kind of curricular work and ideas that are going on in these other classrooms.
So this is going to be huge for teachers who, I'm looking ahead to once they've completed this course. And they've come to understand what 21st century learning characteristics are. They've come to understand their own inventory of skills and weaknesses and where they need to build up. They've come to understand which of these 84 projects that the partnership has articulated are going to be relevant to them. But it could easily be that their own classroom becomes a learning circle where they're focusing on 2 projects, but their students are engaged with other classrooms that are focusing on entirely different projects, and yet because we're all part of this community, that can actually happen, which would not be able to happen without an understanding of that learning circle model. Now you've distilled lessons, you've got learnings from your learning circles about how all of this should work. Can you share with us what some of the findings are